Welcome to Amazing Reality channel. Today presenting Paul Brunton and The Secret Orient.
Paul Brunton, who began his professional career as a journalist in early 20th century London, always maintained a questioning and critical perspective, eventually becoming one of the most respected mystical philosophers of the 20th century and one of the greatest modern explorers of the East. His books, published worldwide, remain a source of light for millions. He was born in London in 1898 with the name of Raphael Hurst. Disappointed with the dogmas of religion and the sensationalism of many spiritual groups, he knocked on many doors in his initial search. Doubts and lack of evidence caused him to keep seeking, transforming him into a discerning and questioning seeker. Continuing his search, meeting many teachers, and working as a journalist in London, Brunton one day met a regal-looking Indian in a London bookstore. Fascinated by him, they soon became friends. The Indian's name was never revealed by Brunton in his writings, but during several private meetings, he told Brunton that while India had been degenerating for centuries, that it was still inhabited by extraordinary beings divided into two classes: the yogis, rare in a crowd of impostors, and the rishis, higher than the yogis and true enlightened people. Brunton never saw the Indian man again, but months later another meeting began a new phase of his search. Talking to an inspired friend, Brunton was surprised to hear the following words from him. "I am certain that one day you will go in search of the yogis in India, to the lamas in Tibet, and to the Zen monks in Japan. Then you will have vast material to write of unusual memories." Astonished by these words, Brunton did not think that a trip to the East was possible for him at that moment. 12 months later, he landed in Bombay, India. India at the time of Brunton was still a British colony, and he soon came to understand that if he wanted to get to know the real India, the one that was hidden from foreigners, he would have to leave his Western prejudices and luxuries, live simply, and go to its traditional places with an attitude of respect and sincerity, seeking to know their culture. And so he did. Initially, he encountered the striking images that India still presents to foreigners: unimaginable misery, deeply held superstitions, and a growing Western-style materialism. But Paul Brunton persisted in his pursuit of India's true wisdom. In his solitary spiritual journey through the country, he faced all kinds of difficulties, traveling from great cities to impoverished villages, penetrating mysterious jungles and exploring enigmatic caves, entering places that had never before received a Western foot. And in this great journey he found 4 very different categories of spirituality. The first consisted of hoaxers and charlatans dressed as mystics, pseudo-yogis and conjurers. They formed a multitude and were often nothing more than skillful beggars in search of coins. They were everywhere. The second category, less common and more interesting, consisting of people with real powers, who performed miracles that withstood all tests. Brunton witnessed demonstrations that left him astonished, such as telepathy, telekinesis, and clairvoyance. In this category were the famous fakirs, a name that designates both Muslim and Hindu mystics of this lower grade. In the third category, extremely less common and located only with great difficulty, were the few true yogis. Wise and elusive, they did not care about money or fame and avoided publicity. Some lived in caves, others in the woods or in the Himalayas. With them, Brunton felt a transmission of strength not experienced with the first two groups, and he witnessed real powers that touched the soul. But this was still not enough for Brunton. His search for something deeper remained as an urgent call. Despite having witnessed wonders that appeared unbelievable, nothing that Brunton had seen so far was enough to touch his soul, remove his skepticism, or transform him. It was at the height of this discouragement, when he was considering abandoning India, that Brunton found what he was looking for. He finally located a rishi, one of those extremely rare beings that his friend in London had described as the wisest of humans. According to the report of a spiritual leader that Brunton met, in India at that time, there were only 2 authentic rishis alive. Brunton found one of them. It was at his feet in the depths of a remote area in South India at the foot of the sacred mountain of Arunachala, the mountain of spiritual light, that Paul Brunton finally found someone who could offer him the peace that he was seeking. There he met Sri Ramana Maharishi, one of India's last great beings, and according to his disciples, a real enlightened one. Ramana Maharishi was born in 1879. At the age of 16, he had a sudden experience of cosmic consciousness and abandoned his family. He meditated in silence and alone for 20 years on the mountain of Arunachala, in its jungles, in abandoned temples, and even in the open, until he stabilized his enlightenment and was willing to take on the role of teacher. The news that India had produced a great enlightened one had reached only a few Indians, some who went to meet the strange ascetic who wore nothing but a thong, but who transformed people just by looking at them. On those occasions when he spoke, Ramana surprised the highly respected scholars and scholastics who found in him answers for the most intricate theological problems. Hindus of all sects, as well as the followers of other religions, had profound experiences in the presence of Ramana, who became to be called a Maharishi, a great sage. Although he would answer questions, Ramana taught primarily by silence, changing people and guiding them by the power of this silence, by the power of his gaze and of his presence. Brunton arrived to his meeting with Ramana reserving judgments and with a list of questions with dilemmas that he sought answers to. Questions such as, if there is a God, why is there so much horror and suffering in the world? How can wars between nations be prevented? Is humanity a transitory phenomenon that has come out of nowhere and will return to it? If humans have a divine soul, why do we remain in ignorance and do evil? What is the mystery of human consciousness? What is the meaning of life? How to achieve true peace. Prepared to ask the sage all these questions, Brunton instead experienced the impulse to simply be in Ramana's presence for a while before attempting to speak to him. Enraptured by the silence of the sage, Brunton noticed how Ramana remained silent but with eyes open, as if absorbed in the infinite, surrounded by his disciples in an environment cradled by the aroma of incense. In the first hour, Brunton was tempted to leave the place. What was he doing there? Why didn't Maharishi say anything? But as soon as he put his expectations aside and his intellect calmed down, Paul Brunton lived one of the most powerful experiences of his life. He realized that one by one his questions were falling away as if they were irrelevant. He felt an immense and true peace only rarely experienced before, a joy without cause, as if everything were already perfect and complete. Finally, he lost consciousness and experienced a state of bliss that no words could describe. When he came to his senses, he understood Ramana's method of instructing and transforming his disciples. Brunton spent months in the presence of Ramana Maharishi, drinking from his wisdom. And it was Brunton's destiny to introduce Maharishi to the world and cause him to be followed throughout India and even admired in the West, including by famous personalities such as the psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung, the playwright William Stoddard, and the Sanskritist Heinrich Zimmer. Having experienced a peace that other teachers did not offer, Brunton returned to the West and wrote his first book, A Search in Secret India, planning to make further trips to the East and, as his London friend had predicted, contacting Tibetan lamas, Zen monks from Japan, Taoists from China, and other spiritual teachers throughout the East and West. This phase of his life became an endless pilgrimage in which he circled the globe many times. Brunton also traveled to Egypt as described in his third book, A Search in Secret Egypt, and there he became the first and only person to spend the night in the king's chamber located in the center of the Cheops pyramid. All alone in this mysterious chamber, Brunton had an overwhelming mystical experience in which he experienced a psychic unfolding and was telepathically guided to the secret undiscovered enclosures of the Great Pyramid. In this experience, the true purpose of the Great Pyramid was revealed to him, that it was an ancient initiatory structure built in a period prior to what is currently claimed, with techniques still unknown today. Brunton also learned that under the left paw of the Sphinx are kept records of the construction and purpose of the pyramid, as well as documents of Atlantean origin that, when discovered, would serve to rewrite history. He was told at the right time these treasures would be discovered by humanity. Paul Brunton's first 10 books, written from the mid-1930s to the early 1950s, recounting his travels and his insights, quickly became bestsellers in over 15 languages and remain an inspired guide for seekers today, over 75 years later. Among them we highlight A Search in Secret India, A Search in Secret Egypt, The Wisdom of the Overself, A Message from Arunachala, The Inner Reality, and The Hidden Teaching Beyond Yoga. After his long period of travel, Brunton took refuge in quiet Vevey, Switzerland, and from there he continued to record inspired thoughts coming from a deepening of his own realization. Famous and sought after by many seekers all over the world, Brunton always preferred to be called a disciple and researcher, and never that of a master. Brunton died in 1981 at age 83 in his Swiss refuge, having left his notebooks of over 20,000 pages of spiritual reflections for posthumous publication. They have been published in English as the Notebooks of Paul Brunton, of which the first 3 of 16 volumes are available in Portuguese. He used the term overself as a synonym for the source of divine wisdom within each being, stating that this higher self at the core of each being is the point where the finite human meets the infinite and responds to the absolute, to the ineffable being touching that which transcends its own existence. In the modern history of esotericism and the occult, Paul Brunton's name shines with a special light. From both the sacred recesses of the East and the ancient traditions of the West, he knew how to bring precious gems adapted to the Western thirst. Experiencing the truth, he felt an inner call to make it available to his readers, reminding them that it could only be achieved within each one through the practice of silence, philosophic study, and deep meditation.